Radio TV phono nut here, and this is going to be more of a show and tell because this has already been repaired. What we have is a talking book record player that was designed by the American Foundation for the Blind. I'm guessing this is probably from around 1948 or so, and plays 33 1/3 RPM records. The repair wasn't much to it, just your general capacitor replacement and a little mechanical spruce up of the drive mechanism. It could stand a new idler wheel, but I'm probably not going to go that far with this. This is not something I'm going to be using on a regular basis. This is just more for historical purposes than anything else. And we'll get a look at the data plate here. They call this a sonograph, designed by American Foundation for the Blind, New York, New York. And you can see we have a headphone jack here, and then we have our controls for off, on, volume, and tone, and then this toggle switch is for motor off and on. Basically, this looks like a garden variety 78 RPM player of the day that was redesigned for talking book use. But one thing of interest is this tone arm. You see it has a weight back here on it, but it doesn't look like a counterweight. It looks like more for anti-skating purposes. And this uses a magnetic cartridge, which I find odd, and I have no idea who made this cartridge. I can tell you it's not a GE variable reluctance cartridge, but that's about all I can tell you. It slides in on a little sled here, and the sled attaches to the tone arm with standard 1/2 inch mount spacing. The needle appears to be an integral part of the cartridge, as in it's not user replaceable, so I guess this was designed so when the needle wore out or became damaged, you could just pull the cartridge out of the sled, unplug the wires from it, attach a new one, and you're back in business. Although I've got a feeling this type of cartridge hasn't been made in 70 years, so there you go. And I don't think the needle is in that great a shape, but like I said, this is not something I'm going to be using on a regular basis. Now, like I said, this is 33 RPM for talking book use, but this is not designed for microgroove records. Talking books for the blind from 1934 until about 53 were on 12-inch 33 1/3 RPM records that had a wide groove spacing. I think they were a little bit narrower than a 78 RPM standard groove, but not by much. And this is one such record. Here is one of the later 12-inch 33 1/3 talking books from 1954. Now this one uses a microgroove format, and it will not play on this record player. I tried and it skips. So with that said, we'll turn this on. I'll give you a demonstration, and then I will pull the motor board off and we'll have a look at the underside. Now I find it odd that a little player like this would use a magnetic cartridge. I figured they would have used a conventional crystal type cartridge. Maybe the reason they went with a magnetic is because of how unreliable the crystal cartridges can be, and they figured a magnetic cartridge would hold up longer. And this one has indeed held up apparently, but they should have made one with a replaceable stylus. Alright, let's see. Now this has a tone arm rest where you just slide the tone arm gently down the side of the rest, and it lands in the lead-in groove of the record.
Birds of Western North America by Arthur A. Allen. Complete on 2 records. Recorded solely for the use of the blind in the Talking Book Studios of American Foundation for the Blind, Incorporated. Bird songs recorded in the field by the Laboratory of Ornithology, Cornell University. Read by Kermit Murdoch. First you will hear the songs of the 12 birds that are included in Birds of Western North America. The wren tit. California Thrasher.
Alright, now just for fun, I'm going to place a microgroove record on the turntable and show you how it performs.
Go Team Go by John R. Kunis. Copyright 1954 by John R. Kunis. Record studios of the American Printing House for the Blind, 1954. Intended so William Morrow and Company, Incorporated. Read by Paul Clark. The development of people is the first concern.
As you can hear, it is playing, but it is skipping a good bit too. If there was a way we could fit this cartridge with a 2mm stylus, you know, that's the all-speed compromise needle, and it would probably play both types of records, but I'm not going to mess with that. It works like it is, and I'm not going to take a chance on messing anything up. But if anybody knows what kind of cartridge this is, I'd love your input on that. Now, we're going to unplug it, open it up, let you have a look at the underside. Here's the turntable drive mechanism. It looks just like what was found in many 78 players, except this one has a smaller diameter motor shaft to allow the platter to run at 33 1/3 RPM. Oh yeah, and I also replaced the motor mounting grommets. The old ones had turned to powder and the motor was sagging. And here's the underside. As you can see, it has a nice beefy motor, and it is fuse protected. And we have a pretty nice, about a 5-inch speaker here. And then we have a hole drilled here. I guess this was where a conventional tone arm would be mounted, but they have it covered up with the case covering here. So like I figured, this was they probably bought some stock 78 players from some offshoot manufacturer and then modified them for their needs for talking book playback. That's what I figure happened. I don't know, but that's what it looks like. Here's the chassis. Virtually all of the capacitors were bad. The resistors were, some of them were a little bit borderline, but not enough to make me want to change them. This capacitor here, someone had replaced at some point in time. It's the volume control coupling capacitor, and I believe the sprayed capacitors with the red print are the diafilm type, so those are generally okay. Whoever replaced this did a sloppy job, so I cleaned up their repair work a little bit. The tube complement, according to the schematic here, is a 12SJ7, which is I believe a sharp cutoff pentode. But somebody has a 12SK7, which is a remote cutoff pentode plugged in the socket. It seems to be working okay, but one day I probably will change it back to the correct tube. And then we have a 50L6, and then we have a Lochtel 50Y6, I believe is the number, for the rectifier. And if you look here, it appears that this had a octal based rectifier tube in it, but someone built a socket adapter for a 50Y6, but when we look at the schematic, which we'll look at in a minute, the schematic calls for a 50Y6, so I think this was built that way from the factory. You know, they had probably a bunch of leftover chassis parts and whatnot from something else, so instead of taking out the octal socket and putting a Lochtel socket in there, they just built an adapter to use the 50Y6. Now they could have used a 35Z5 in this application, but that would have called for a dropping resistor, which would have been another heat producing device. And seeing as how this was made shortly after the war ended, they probably got a heck of a deal on surplus 50Y6s, so that's probably the reason they did it this way. But very interesting design for sure. This is a hot chassis set, meaning one side of the AC power line connects directly to the chassis, so you got to be careful with that. Alright, we'll move this out of the way and we'll take a look at the schematic diagram that they were so generous to provide us. Alright, apparently this was made by Sound Apparatus Company. I've never heard of them before. Sonograph wiring diagram, and that date looks like October. Let me try to focus this in here. I can't quite tell. October something, looks like 47, so this was probably actually built in early 48. Here's the schematic diagram. Of course, since this uses a magnetic cartridge, that cartridge will have a much lower output than your typical crystal or ceramic cartridge based phonograph, so that's why they had this 12SJ7 pentode for higher gain there. But other than that, the circuit diagram looks pretty much like your garden variety phonograph of the day. So now that you've seen everything, I'll put it back together and that'll be that. Here's another book entitled The Country Beyond. Unfortunately, this is an incomplete set, but these older talking books from the pre-microgroove era are pretty rare. In fact, I don't have many of them at all. In fact, most of my talking book record collection was sent to me by a friend who got them probably back in the 90s sometime. The blind school that he was affiliated with was purging a lot of their older talking books that were no longer used, and if he hadn't taken them, they would have all gone in a dumpster. So he took them and transferred them to digital format for his use and sent the records to me because he knew I would enjoy them. So let's hear what this one sounds like.
Page 20, The Country Beyond. For the first time, the ferret leveled his eyes at his companion. They were mystifying eyes, never appearing to open fully, but remaining half closed as if to conceal whatever
Got
thought
some
might lie
mechanical
behind
noise there.
The cave felt their penetration. It was like a cold chill entering into him, warning him of a menace deadlier than the storm. Haven't any idea where one might come upon this, Jolly Roger, have you?
Yeah, you can tell the accents of those older talking book narrators are a lot different than the accents of the talking book narrators of today. So there you have it, a little show and tell there of a rare talking book player. This was one that I got off of eBay that I watched for a long time. When it first appeared, it was way overpriced, and I just kept watching it and watching it and watching it, and thankfully they were one of the sensible sellers that had the if it don't sell, lower the price until it sells attitude. So it started coming down in price, and finally I submitted an offer and they took it, and there you go. I still paid a bit more for it than what I would have liked, but I've never seen one of these in all of my years, and the chances of me seeing another one is probably slim to none. So I figured if I could get it for a price I could somewhat live with, then I better go ahead and get it. Now, as far as talking book machines go, this is the first type I've ever seen with this type of footprint. All of the other talking book machines I've seen were physically bigger, most of which had the speaker mounted in the lid of the machine. A few of them had the speaker on the front here, and most of them had a transformer powered amplifier. I've seen a couple of them that used a series string amplifier, but not a full-blown hot chassis like this thing is. On all the rest of them, they had a capacitor connected between B- and chassis that still won't prevent you from getting shocked. It will normally should prevent the amount of available current from being lethal, unless of course the capacitor is leaky or shorted, and then all bets are off. But like I said, I paid a bit more for this than what I would have liked, but I have never seen one in the past, and I'll probably never see another one. These are probably fairly rare, so I figured I'd better jump on it while I could. Alright, so enough for now. Hopefully one of these days we'll get back into something more interesting. So more to come later, I hope.